The morning sun cast long shadows across the United Earth Council building in Geneva when the first reports came in. Admiral Kate Morrison stood in the command center, watching the massive display screen show something that made her blood run cold. Ships were appearing at the edge of the solar system, but these were not human ships. They were bigger than anything humanity had ever built, larger than entire cities, and there were hundreds of them. President Daniel Carter arrived within minutes, his face pale as he looked at the screen. The alien fleet had positioned itself just beyond Pluto, close enough to be detected but far enough to avoid immediate confrontation. General Lisa Park stood beside them, her military uniform crisp despite the early hour. She had been tracking unusual energy readings for the past week, but nothing had prepared them for this. The communication came 3 hours later. A deep voice spoke perfect English, though the accent was unlike anything human ears had heard before. The being on the screen was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and eyes that seemed to see through everything they looked at. He wore robes that shimmered with their own light, and when he spoke, his words carried the weight of absolute authority. "I am Ambassador Zekhar of the Zephyrian Empire," the alien said. His voice filled the council chamber where Earth's leaders had gathered. "In emergency session, we represent the will of Emperor Vexthul, ruler of 3,000 star systems and master of countless worlds. We have come to offer your species a choice." Chief of Intelligence Ryan Blake leaned forward in his chair. He had spent years studying the possibility of alien contact, but none of his scenarios had prepared him for this moment. The alien's words were calm, almost polite, but there was something underneath that made every person in the room uncomfortable. "Your species has spread beyond your home world," Zekhar continued. "You have established colonies and built ships. You have shown the ambition that marks all intelligent life. This ambition has brought you to our attention, and now you must choose your future." President Carter stepped forward, his voice steady despite the fear he felt. "What kind of choice are you offering us?" The alien's expression did not change. "You will submit to the authority of the Zephyrian Empire. Your worlds will become part of our territory. Your people will serve the Empire's needs. Your ships will be absorbed into our fleet. In return, your species will continue to exist under our protection and guidance." The silence in the room was complete. Outside, normal life continued in the city below, but inside this chamber, the fate of humanity hung in the balance. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, Earth's leading expert on alien biology, finally spoke. "And if we refuse?" Zekhar's answer was simple and terrible. "Then your species will be removed from existence. Your worlds will be cleansed and given to more worthy beings. This choice has been offered to 733 species. Before you, all but 12 chose to submit. Those 12 no longer exist." Admiral Morrison felt her hands clench into fists. She had spent her entire career protecting human space, fighting pirates and raiders, keeping the trade routes safe. Now she faced an enemy that could destroy her entire fleet without breaking stride. The numbers were impossible. Humanity had 43 warships spread across 17 star systems. The alien fleet outside their system contained more ships than that. General Park asked the question everyone was thinking. "How long do we have to decide?" 72 hours from this moment," Zekhar replied. "After that time, we will assume your answer is refusal and we will act accordingly. Choose wisely, humans. Your species has achieved much in its short existence. It would be unfortunate to see it end here." The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. President Carter looked around the table at the faces of Earth's leaders. Some looked defeated already. Others showed anger. A few seemed to be calculating odds and possibilities. But all of them understood that they faced a choice between slavery and death. Captain John Hayes of the UES Liberty had remained quiet during the alien's speech, but now he stood up. He was younger than most of the other military officers, but he had earned his reputation fighting in the outer colony wars. His ship was one of the fastest in the human fleet, and he had never backed down from a fight, no matter the odds. "With respect, Mr. President," Hayes said, his voice carrying across the silent chamber, "I think we're looking at this wrong. This empire, these Zephyrians, They've conquered over 700 species by offering the same choice: submit or die. But they're still offering the choice, which means they're not sure they can win without a fight. Admiral Morrison shook her head. Captain, look at the numbers. Their smallest ships are larger than our biggest. They have technology we can't even understand. Fighting them would be suicide. Hayes nodded. Maybe it would be, Admiral. But humanity didn't survive by taking the easy path. We didn't reach the stars by giving up when things looked impossible. Our whole history is full of moments when we faced enemies who were bigger and stronger, and somehow we found a way to win. Dr. Rodriguez leaned forward. Captain Hayes is right about our history, but this is different. We're not talking about fighting other humans. These beings have conquered most of a galaxy. They have resources we can't even imagine. But they're still here talking instead of shooting, Hayes replied. That tells me something. Maybe they're not as confident as they want us to believe. Maybe they know that humans are different from the other species they've conquered. Chief Blake had been quiet, but now he spoke up. I've been analyzing their transmission. The technology is advanced, yes, but it's not magic. They use quantum communication just like us. Their ships are big, but big ships are slow to turn. Big fleets need lots of supplies. The bigger you are, the more problems you have. President Carter felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. In 72 hours, he would have to give an answer that would determine whether humanity lived as slaves or died as free beings. The choice seemed impossible, but as he looked around the table, he began to see something in the faces of Earth's leaders. Not defeat, but determination. Not fear, but defiance. The debate raged for 18 hours without a break. President Carter had called together every important leader from across human space, and the emergency council session had turned into something between a war planning meeting and a philosophical argument about the nature of human existence. Some argued for survival at any cost, while others insisted that a life without freedom was no life at all. Admiral Morrison found herself caught between her duty to protect human lives and her understanding of what humanity represented. She had served in space for 30 years, watching human colonies grow from small outposts into thriving worlds. The idea of seeing all that progress handed over to alien masters made her stomach turn, but the alternative seemed like throwing away billions of lives for the sake of pride. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had spent the last 12 hours trying to establish communication with other species the Zephyrians had conquered. Using quantum transmissions that the aliens might not detect, she had managed to contact 3 different worlds. What she learned changed everything she thought she knew about the Empire's methods. The Valdris were a warrior culture, she reported to the council. They had ships almost as advanced as the Zephyrians when they were conquered 200 years ago. They fought for 3 months before they surrendered. Now they work in mining operations on the edge of Zephyrian space. But here's the important part. They're still fighting. Small groups, hidden bases, sabotage operations. The Empire never completely crushed their spirit. Chief Blake leaned forward in his chair. His intelligence networks had been working around the clock to gather information about the alien fleet. The Nexari were even more interesting. They were a trading civilization spread across dozens of systems. When the Zephyrians came, they offered the same choice. The Nexari submitted, but they never stopped being Nexari. They still control most of the trade networks in their sector, and they've been helping other conquered species maintain their identities. This information changed the discussion. If other species had found ways to resist even after surrender, maybe submission wasn't the complete defeat it appeared to be. But Captain Hayes stood up again, his voice cutting through the murmur of conversation. With all due respect to the doctor and the chief, Hayes said, we're still talking about giving up without a fight. The Valdris and Nexari might be resisting now, but they're still slaves. Their worlds belong to someone else. Their children grow up under alien rule. Is that really what we want for humanity? General Park had been studying tactical reports from the colonies. Captain Hayes, I understand your feelings, but let's look at the reality. We have 43 military ships spread across 17 systems. The alien fleet has over 400 ships just in our solar system. Even if we called back every ship, every fighter, every armed merchant vessel, we're looking at impossible odds. Chief Engineer Marcus Webb had arrived from the Luna shipyards 6 hours earlier, and he had been unusually quiet during the debate. Now he stood up, holding a tablet filled with technical data. "Actually, General, I've been running some calculations. The captain might be onto something." The room fell silent as Webb activated the main display. Technical specifications for both human and Zephyrian ships appeared on the screen. Their ships are massive, yes, but look at the power requirements. Look at the crew sizes. Look at the supply needs. A single Zephyrian dreadnought requires more resources than our entire fleet combined. Dr. Amy Liu, who had been working with Webb on experimental weapons projects, stepped forward. "Marcus is right. These ships are designed for overwhelming force, not for efficiency. They're built to win through intimidation as much as firepower. But that makes them vulnerable in ways they might not expect." President Carter felt a spark of hope for the first time since the aliens had arrived. "What kind of vulnerabilities?" Liu brought up new displays showing energy flow patterns. "Their weapons are incredibly powerful, but they take enormous amounts of energy to charge and fire. During the charging cycle, their shields are weakened. Their ships are too big to maneuver quickly, which means they rely on their shields and armor to absorb damage while they line up their shots." Webb nodded. "And there's something else. Dr. Rodriguez's communications with the conquered species revealed something interesting. The Empire uses a rare element called trilithium to power their largest ships. The Valdris mentioned that supply ships carrying trilithium are heavily guarded but lightly armed. The implications were becoming clear. Admiral Morrison stood up, her expression thoughtful. "You're suggesting we don't fight them ship to ship. We use smaller, faster vessels to exploit their weaknesses while targeting their supply lines." "Exactly," Hayes said. "Humanity has always won by being smarter, not stronger. We used guerrilla tactics against the British Empire. We defeated the Nazis by outproducing them and outthinking them. We reached the stars by solving problems that seemed impossible." Chief Blake was already thinking tactically. "If we're going to do this, we need allies. The conquered species Dr. Rodriguez contacted, they might be willing to help. And we need every ship we can get, military or civilian." The idea was taking shape, but it was still incredibly dangerous. General Park voiced what everyone was thinking. "Even if we could hurt them, even if we could win some battles, they'll just send more ships. The Empire has thousands of systems. We have 17. Dr. Rodriguez had been quiet, but now she spoke with conviction. "Maybe that's exactly what we need to count on. If we can prove that humans can fight back successfully, other conquered species might join us." The Valdris commander I spoke with said they've been waiting for someone to make the first move. The Nexari have ships and resources hidden throughout their territory. We wouldn't be fighting alone. The debate continued through the night, but the mood had changed. Instead of arguing about whether to fight or surrender, they were now discussing how to fight and win. President Carter could see the determination growing in the faces around him. These people were beginning to believe that the impossible might be possible after all. As dawn broke over Geneva, President Carter called for a final vote. The decision would not be easy, and many of them might not survive what was coming. But they had found something more important than safety. They had found hope, and they had found the courage to act on it despite the overwhelming odds against them. President Carter stood before the assembled leaders of humanity and took a deep breath that seemed to carry the weight of their entire species. The 72 hours were nearly up, and outside Earth's atmosphere, the Zephyrian fleet waited for an answer. The decision had been made, but speaking it aloud would make it real in a way that nothing else could. "We have made our choice," Carter said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to announce. "Humanity will not submit to the Zephyrian Empire. We will not become slaves no matter the cost. We choose to fight." The words echoed through the council chamber and across the quantum communication network that connected all human worlds. On Mars, colonists stopped their work to listen. In the asteroid mining stations, workers gathered around communication screens. On the frontier worlds at the edge of human space, settlers who had never seen Earth felt their hearts racing as they heard their species choose defiance over safety. Admiral Morrison immediately began implementing the battle plan they had developed. Every human ship within 3 days' travel was ordered to converge on Earth. The civilian vessels were just as important as the military ones. Cargo ships, passenger liners, mining vessels, research craft, even luxury yachts responded to the call. Captain Susan Walsh, who commanded a small fleet of converted freight haulers, sent word that her ships were already on their way. The response from the Zephyrian Empire came within minutes of Carter's announcement. Ambassador Zekhar appeared on screens throughout human space, his pale blue face showing no emotion as he delivered what sounded like a funeral speech. "The human species has chosen extinction," he said. "Emperor Vexthul expresses regret that such a promising race has chosen pride over survival. The cleansing will begin immediately. Let this serve as an example to other species who might consider similar foolishness." But humanity was not sitting idle while the aliens prepared their attack. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had managed to establish secure communications with resistance groups throughout Zephyrian space. The Valdris commander, a being called Thexal, had agreed to launch simultaneous attacks on Empire supply lines. The Nexari leadership had promised to provide intelligence about Zephyrian fleet movements and weaknesses. Chief Engineer Webb and Dr. Liu had been working around the clock to prepare Earth's defenses. They had positioned automated defense platforms at strategic points throughout the solar system, each one armed with the new quantum torpedoes that could phase through enemy shields. The weapons were untested in real combat, but the theory was sound. Captain Hayes had volunteered to lead the most dangerous part of the operation. His ship, the UES Liberty, was fast enough to get close to the Zephyrian flagship, and his crew was experienced enough to handle the precision flying required for their mission. They would attempt to board the enemy command vessel and capture or kill the Zephyrian admiral leading the attack. The battle began at dawn on the 4th day. The Zephyrian fleet moved into attack position around Earth, their massive ships blotting out sections of the starfield. Admiral Morrison coordinated the human response from the bridge of the UES Defiant, her flagship taking point in a formation that looked pitifully small compared to the alien armada. The first exchange of fire was devastating. Zephyrian energy. Beams tore through human shields like they were made of paper. 3 ships were destroyed in the first minute, their crews vaporized before they could even send distress signals. But the human response was not what the aliens expected. Instead of forming up in traditional battle lines, the human ships scattered like a swarm of angry insects. Small fighters darted between the massive alien vessels, too fast and too small for the big guns to track effectively. The converted civilian ships used their cargo holds to launch clouds of debris and chaff, confusing the alien targeting systems. Captain Walsh led her freight convoy in a daring run past the Zephyrian battle line. Her ships were not built for combat, but they were built to carry massive loads, and today they were carrying something special. As they passed the alien dreadnoughts, they released thousands of small drones, each one programmed to attach itself to enemy hull plating and detonate. The first phase of the battle lasted 6 hours, and by its end, both sides had taken heavy casualties. The human fleet had lost nearly half its ships, but they had managed to disable or destroy 12 Zephyrian vessels. More importantly, they had proved that the Empire's ships were not invincible. While the space battle raged, Commander Beth Turner was leading a different kind of mission. Her special operations team had managed to infiltrate one of the alien supply convoys that was approaching from the outer system. Using stealth ships and electronic warfare techniques, they had boarded 3 trilithium carriers. Sergeant Mike Collins, the team's demolitions expert, placed carefully calculated charges throughout the trilithium storage areas. The explosions that followed were visible from Earth as brilliant flashes of light that briefly outshone the sun. The loss of the trilithium caused power failures throughout the Zephyrian fleet, leaving many of their largest ships temporarily helpless. But the most crucial moment came when the Resistance allies arrived. Ships from the Valdris Resistance and the Nexari Underground emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. Their vessels were smaller than the Zephyrian dreadnoughts, but they knew every weakness of Empire technology. Led by Commander Thexel and Warlord Grix, they struck at precisely the right moment. The combined assault caught the Zephyrian admiral completely off guard. His fleet was designed to overwhelm a single enemy through superior firepower, not to handle coordinated attacks from multiple directions by forces that understood his technology's limitations. For the first time in centuries, a Zephyrian fleet found itself outmaneuvered and outfought. Captain Hayes made his move during the chaos of the three-way battle. The UES Liberty shot through the combat zone like a bullet, using the debris from destroyed ships as cover. Hayes and his boarding team reached the alien flagship just as its shields went down due to the trilithium shortage. The cost of victory was enormous. The UES Defiant took a direct hit from a Zephyrian dreadnought and was torn apart, taking Admiral Morrison and her entire crew with it. Captain Walsh's convoy was reduced to a single surviving ship. Hundreds of brave men and women died in the first day of humanity's war for survival. But as the surviving Zephyrian ships retreated from Earth's system, something had changed in the galaxy. For the first time in the Empire's history, a species had chosen to fight rather than submit, and they had won. The news spread through the quantum communication networks faster than the retreating alien fleet could travel, and on worlds throughout Zephyrian space, conquered peoples began to believe that freedom might be possible after all. The news of humanity's victory over the Zephyrian fleet spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. On worlds that had been under Empire rule for centuries, beings who had never known freedom began to whisper about the impossible battle at Earth. The humans had done what no one thought possible. They had defeated a Zephyrian invasion force and lived to tell about it. Fleet Admiral Hayes, newly promoted after Admiral Morrison's heroic death, stood in the rebuilt command center on Luna. The Earth had been damaged in the battle, but humanity had survived, and that was what mattered. Around him, officers from a dozen different species worked side by side with humans, coordinating what had become the largest rebellion in galactic history. President Carter, now operating from a secure facility on Mars, had established the Free Galaxy Coalition within weeks of the victory. Species from across known space had sent representatives offering whatever help they could provide. The Altarian Republic contributed their advanced shield technology, which was far superior to anything humans had developed. The Christine Collective shared detailed intelligence about Zephyrian military tactics and fleet movements. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had become the Coalition's chief diplomatic officer, a role she had never expected, but found herself uniquely qualified to fill. Her background in xenobiology helped her understand the different species they were working with, while her experience with the resistance networks gave her credibility with groups that had been fighting the Empire for generations. The rebellion was spreading faster than anyone had anticipated. Within a month of Earth's victory, 17 different star systems had declared independence from the Empire. The Valdris had launched full-scale attacks on Imperial mining operations. The Nexari had shut down trade routes that the Empire depended on for moving supplies and troops. Dozens of smaller species had begun sabotage operations against Imperial installations, but Emperor Vex Thul was not going to let the rebellion spread without a response. Intelligence reports indicated that he was assembling a massive fleet, larger than anything the Empire had ever deployed. The Imperial First Fleet was being recalled from the outer territories, bringing together over 5,000 warships for a campaign designed to crush the rebellion once and for all. Chief of Intelligence Blake had established spy networks throughout Zephyrian space, working with local resistance groups to gather information about Imperial movements. Agent Nicole Grant, working undercover in the Empire's capital system, had managed to extract several high-ranking Imperial defectors who provided crucial intelligence about the enemy's plans. The Emperor's strategy was brutally simple. He would attack coalition worlds one by one, making examples of them to show other species what happened to those who defied Imperial authority. The first target was the Valdris homeworld, where Commander Thexal had been coordinating resistance operations from hidden bases in the planet's mountain ranges. Fleet Admiral Hayes faced an impossible decision. The Coalition fleet had grown to over 800 ships from various species, but most were converted civilian vessels or light warships designed for patrol duty. Against the Imperial First Fleet, they would be massively outgunned and outnumbered. Yet they could not allow the Empire to systematically destroy their allies. Dr. Amy Liu had been working with engineering teams from multiple species to develop new weapons and defensive systems. The quantum cascade bombs she had invented could disable enemy weapons without destroying the ships themselves, which meant captured Imperial vessels could be converted to Coalition use. Chief Engineer Webb had designed mobile shipyards that could repair and refit Coalition vessels in deep space, eliminating the need for fixed bases that the Empire could target. The solution came from an unexpected source. The Nexari warlord Grix had spent decades studying Imperial supply chains and had discovered a critical weakness. The massive First Fleet required enormous quantities of supplies, especially the trilithium that powered their largest vessels. All of those supplies had to pass through a single heavily defended system called Nexus Prime. If we can take Nexus Prime, Grix explained during a Coalition strategy meeting, we can cut off supplies to the entire First Fleet. Without trilithium, their dreadnoughts become floating scrap metal. Without food and medical supplies, their crews become desperate and unreliable. The plan was audacious and incredibly dangerous. Nexus Prime was defended by over 300 Imperial warships and countless defensive platforms. It was considered the most secure location in Zephyrian space outside of the Imperial capital itself. But it was also the key to everything the Empire was trying to accomplish. Fleet Admiral Hayes assembled a strike force of 200 ships, the fastest and most maneuverable vessels the Coalition could spare. Captain Walsh, now commanding a squadron of heavily modified freight haulers, volunteered her ships for the mission despite having barely survived the battle at Earth. Commander Turner's special operations teams would spearhead the assault on Aoi, the station's defensive systems. The attack on Nexus Prime began with a diversion. Coalition forces launched simultaneous raids on Imperial installations in 6 different systems, drawing away some of the station's defensive fleet. Meanwhile, Hayes led the main strike force through a dangerous route that took them through an asteroid field where sensors could not easily detect them. The battle for Nexus Prime lasted for 3 days and became one of the most significant engagements of the war. Coalition forces used every trick they had learned about fighting Zephyrian ships, exploiting the Empire's reliance on overwhelming firepower rather than tactical flexibility. Small fighter squadrons led by pilots like Commander Lisa Park harassed the huge Imperial vessels, while the main fleet targeted supply convoys and support ships. The turning point came when Dr. Rodriguez successfully negotiated the surrender of an entire Imperial squadron. The Zephyrian ships had been crewed by conscripts from conquered species who had no loyalty to the Empire. When they realized they were fighting for freedom rather than conquest, many of them switched sides, bringing their ships and knowledge with them. By the end of the battle, Nexus Prime had fallen to Coalition forces. The victory came at a high price, with over 60 Coalition ships destroyed and thousands of casualties. But the strategic implications were enormous. The Imperial First Fleet, already committed to attacking Coalition worlds, suddenly found itself cut off from its supply lines. Emperor Vexthul's response was swift and merciless. Instead of retreating to secure new supply lines, he ordered the First Fleet to continue its campaign, living off captured resources and using increasingly brutal tactics against civilian populations. The Emperor seemed determined to crush the rebellion through sheer terror, even if it meant sacrificing his own forces. But the Coalition had proven something important at Nexus Prime. The Zephyrian Empire was not invincible. Their ships could be defeated, their stations could be captured, and their crews could be convinced to change sides. Most importantly, species throughout the galaxy were beginning to believe that victory was possible. As reports came in of new worlds joining the rebellion and Imperial forces facing resistance wherever they went, Fleet Admiral Hayes realized that the war had entered a new phase. The Coalition was no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting to free an entire galaxy from centuries of oppression. The day humanity chose defiance over survival had become the day the galaxy chose freedom over fear. Emperor Vexthul arrived at Earth with a fleet that blotted out the stars. Over 10,000 Imperial warships surrounded the human homeworld, more military power than had ever been assembled in one place in galactic history. The Emperor himself commanded from the bridge of his flagship, a vessel so massive that it had its own gravitational field. His message to the coalition was simple: surrender immediately or watch Earth burn. Fleet Admiral Hayes stood in the coalition command center, looking at displays that showed impossible odds. The combined coalition fleet had grown to include ships from over 40 different species, but they numbered only 300 vessels against an armada that seemed endless. Many of his officers recommended evacuation, suggesting that Earth could be abandoned to save the coalition fleet for future battles. "We don't abandon Earth," Hayes said quietly. "This is where it all started. This is where humanity chose to fight instead of submit. If we run now, we betray everything our people died for." President Carter, now 73 years old but still sharp and determined, prepared to address the galaxy one final time. He had been offered safe passage to the outer colonies, but he had refused to leave Earth while the planet faced destruction. His speech would be broadcast to every coalition world and to resistance groups throughout Imperial space. "My fellow beings," Carter began, his voice steady despite the overwhelming force gathering around his world. "We face our greatest test. The tyrant who has enslaved half the galaxy has come to destroy us, to make an example of what happens to those who choose freedom over slavery. But I want you to remember something important. We are not alone." Dr. Elena Rodriguez had spent the past month coordinating with resistance groups throughout the galaxy. She had discovered that the rebellion was far larger than anyone had realized. Hundreds of worlds were ready to rise up simultaneously, striking at Imperial installations while the Emperor's attention was focused on Earth. The plan required perfect timing and enormous courage from beings who had never known freedom. Galactic scientific breakthrough came from Dr. Amy Liu. Working with the quantum research team on Luna, she had discovered that Earth's quantum communication network could be modified into a massive weapon capable of creating dimensional rifts in space. The process would destroy Earth's biosphere and kill everyone on the planet, but it could also cripple or destroy the entire Imperial fleet. "It's our choice to make," Liu explained to the coalition leadership. "We can save Earth and probably lose the war, or we can sacrifice our world to ensure the galaxy goes free. The Emperor is counting on us not being willing to make that sacrifice." The debate that followed was unlike any in human history. They were discussing the voluntary destruction of their own homeworld, the planet where their species had evolved and taken its first steps toward the stars. Some argued that no cause was worth such a price. Others insisted that Earth's sacrifice would inspire the galaxy to complete the rebellion. Commander Beth Turner had infiltrated the Imperial fleet with a team of volunteers from multiple species. Her mission was to plant quantum cascade bombs throughout the enemy formation, devices that would disable Imperial weapons and shields when the Earth weapon activated. It was a suicide mission, but Turner had volunteered without hesitation. Captain Susan Walsh commanded the civilian evacuation fleet, hundreds of ships working desperately to remove as many people as possible from Earth before the final battle. But there were 12 billion humans on the planet, and even working around the clock they could only save a small fraction. Most of Earth's population would remain to face whatever came next. The battle began when the Emperor demanded an immediate response to his ultimatum. Fleet Admiral Hayes transmitted a simple message: "Earth does not surrender. The coalition does not submit. Come and take us if you can." The Imperial response was overwhelming. Energy beams that could destroy cities struck Earth's defensive shields, while waves of fighters swept toward the coalition fleet. But as the battle raged, something unexpected happened. Ships began emerging from hyperspace throughout the solar system. Not Imperial reinforcements, but vessels from dozens of species answering Earth's call. The Altarians arrived with their most advanced warships. The Christine Collective sent a fleet of crystal-hulled vessels that could absorb and redirect energy weapons. Even species that had never been contacted by the coalition appeared, drawn by news of the final battle between tyranny and freedom. The space around Earth became the site of the largest battle in galactic history. Emperor Vexthal, watching from his flagship as his easy victory turned into a desperate struggle, made a fatal decision. He ordered his ship to move closer to Earth, intending to personally oversee the planet's destruction. But this brought him within range of Fleet Admiral Hayes and the core of the Coalition fleet. Hayes led a desperate boarding assault on the Imperial flagship, fighting his way through corridors filled with the Emperor's elite guards. Behind him, Dr. Liu prepared to activate the Earth weapon, knowing that success would mean her own death along with everyone else on the planet. The final confrontation took place in the Emperor's throne room, a vast chamber at the heart of the flagship. Vexthul was enormous even by Zephyrian standards, with pale skin that seemed to glow with its own light and eyes that had watched the conquest of countless worlds. He faced Hayes with weapons that could cut through steel, confident that no single human could threaten him. But Hayes was not fighting alone. With him were warriors from the Valdris, tacticians from the Nexari, and soldiers from a dozen other species who had chosen freedom over safety. The battle was brutal and desperate, with the fate of the galaxy hanging on the outcome of personal combat between the tyrant and those who defied him. When Emperor Vexthul finally fell, struck down by Hayes's blade in a moment of perfect coordination, with his alien allies, something changed throughout the Imperial fleet. The death of their emperor, who had ruled for over 3 centuries, sent shockwaves through the Zephyrian command structure. Ships began to surrender or flee, and the apparently endless Imperial armada began to collapse. Dr. Liu, monitoring the battle from Earth's surface, realized that the planet weapon would not be necessary. The Coalition had won through courage and unity rather than sacrifice and destruction. Earth would survive, and so would the billions of people who called it home. Fleet Admiral Hayes, mortally wounded in his fight with the Emperor, lived long enough to see the Imperial fleet in full retreat. With his dying breath, he transmitted a message to the galaxy. Freedom is not free, but it is worth any price. Today, the galaxy chooses to be free. The aftermath of the battle saw the collapse of the Zephyrian Empire and the birth of a new galactic civilization based on freedom and cooperation, rather than conquest and domination. The Free Galaxy Coalition became a permanent alliance, with Earth serving as the symbolic heart of galactic liberty. Years later, President Carter, now an old man but still active in galactic politics, stood before the memorial of the fallen on Earth. The monument honored all those who had died in the rebellion, from Admiral Morrison in the first battle to Fleet Admiral Hayes in the last. Children from dozens of species played in the memorial gardens, growing up in a galaxy their parents had freed from tyranny. We chose defiance over survival, Carter said to the assembled crowd. But in the end, we found that defiance was survival. We survived as free beings rather than as slaves, and we gave that same gift to an entire galaxy. The day humanity chose to fight rather than submit became the day the galaxy chose light over darkness.